It was like shock news in all media worldwide, because shortly before he took office, Donald Trump announced his megalomaniac expansion plans. Not only did he want to bring the Panama Canal back into American hands, the second largest country in the world, Canada, and the largest island in the world, Greenland, are also on the future US president's wish list. And he underlined that he is serious by saying that he does not want to rule out military means. The proposals are not completely unfounded. In his last term in office, he announced that Greenland must definitely belong to the USA. Even then, the idea made headlines and caused people to shake their heads. But this time, Trump seems more determined than ever. The US president-elect argues that it is in the interest of national security and the freedom of the world to bring Greenland and other strategically important territories under American control. Greenland in particular, with its location in the North Atlantic and its proximity to the Arctic, is indispensable for the USA. He points out that the United States expanded through purchases and takeovers, such as the huge Louisiana Territory in Alaska, and in fact, this is not the first offer to buy Greenland from the Americans. But with this announcement, Trump is not only shaking up international diplomatic conventions, he is also putting Denmark, Greenland itself, and, above all, NATO under massive pressure. So it is urgently time for us to take a closer look at this topic. What is Trump's expansion plans all about? Why is Greenland so incredibly valuable, and how realistic is it that the largest island in the world will soon become part of the USA? We will look at all of these exciting questions in today's video. Enjoy! First, a brief historical overview of what the ownership claims look like today. Greenland was originally a little-noticed spot in history that has now become a key geopolitical region. It was not until the 18th century that Greenland was drawn into the sphere of influence of the Danish kingdom after a long period of isolation. At that time, missionaries began to spread Christianity and establish trade relations. In 1721, Denmark officially declared Greenland to be its colonial possession. In the following centuries, the island remained a remote outpost with little economic and political significance. Nevertheless, Denmark developed close control over the population and natural resources. Greenland was more a symbol of Danish heritage than an economically important part of the kingdom. The change began in the 20th century, when Greenland became the focus of international interests during World War II and the Cold War. With the German occupation of Denmark in 1940, the United States took de facto control of the island and developed it into a strategic base. The establishment of weather stations and military bases, especially the Thule Air Base in the northwest of the island, marked the beginning of a strategic partnership between the United States and Greenland. Nevertheless, the island was returned to Denmark after the war. But during the Cold War, Greenland became an indispensable base for NATO. The airbase plays a central role in the early warning system for nuclear attacks and became a hub for surveillance and communications networks. Its location, roughly halfway between North America and the Soviet Union, made Greenland an indispensable pillar of Western defense strategies. After the war, the relationship between Denmark and Greenland also changed. The colonial period left its mark on Greenlandic society. For decades, there were tensions between Copenhagen and the Greenlandic population, as the island was treated like a colony in many ways. It was only with the introduction of autonomy rights in 1979, and further self-government since 2009, that Greenland gained more control over its affairs. But despite these political advances, Greenland remains dependent on Denmark in many ways. Subsidies from Copenhagen make up a large part of the public budget, and Greenland's economy, which is heavily dependent on fishing, has so far not provided a sufficient basis for full independence. This is precisely where Trump is now coming in. He argues that the US could offer Greenland not only financial stability, but also investment in the development of its rich natural resources. With massive support from American capital, Trump says, the US could fundamentally transform Greenland's economy and enable the island to achieve economic independence that it could never achieve from Denmark alone. But there is of course a clear strategy behind this supposedly benevolent argument. Greenland is not only a potential economic engine, but also a geopolitical key point. By controlling the island, the US could massively expand its presence in the Arctic and assume a dominant position in a region that is increasingly becoming the focus of international power games. Ironically, climate change, which he himself denies, could play into Trump's hands. The ice on Greenland is increasingly melting, and the raw materials released, including rare earths, uranium, oil and gas, could make the USA even more independent of other global supply chains and further strengthen its industrial base. Oil and gas in particular could play a central role in supplying Europe. At the same time, the melting ice is opening up new trade routes that will further increase Greenland's importance for global trade. However, Trump's move goes beyond economic interests. He sees Greenland as an opportunity to demonstrate American power and dominance. The incorporation of the island into the USA would not only secure him a place in the history books, but would also underpin his vision of a strong America. He is resorting to a well-known tactic. He wants to use economic incentives or even military pressure to shift the existing balance of power in his favor. However, the USA's interest in buying is not new. As early as 1867, after the successful acquisition of Alaska from Russia, the USA considered buying Greenland. The then Secretary of State William H. Seward, architect of the Alaska Purchase, saw great potential in Greenland as a trading and military base. But Denmark was not prepared to sell the territory at that time. Another attempt was made in 1946, when the United States under President Harry S. Truman wanted to buy Greenland for $100 million, either in gold or in exchange for land in Alaska. But this attempt also failed. What is the situation today? Greenland itself, which enjoys autonomy rights but is still dependent on Danish subsidies, now finds itself in a difficult position. While Trump is promising massive investments in economic opportunities, such a move carries the risk of the island becoming dependent again, this time on the USA. For many Greenlanders who dream of true independence, this is a dangerous deal that could endanger their cultural and political identity. Denmark, for its part, sees Trump's plans as a direct attack on its sovereignty and the integrity of the kingdom. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has already made it clear that Trump's proposal is absurd and that Greenland is not for sale. Selling Greenland would also be a political risk for Denmark internationally. As a member of the EU and NATO, such a move would strain relations with partner countries and weaken Denmark's image as a sovereign nation. The EU is also increasingly seeing the Arctic as a strategic region, and Greenland's membership of Denmark gives the Union a foot in the door. If Greenland were to pass into US hands, this could significantly shift the balance of power in the region. This would certainly also lead to further tensions with China and Russia, which also have far-reaching ambitions in the Arctic. The region would certainly become an even hotter geopolitical conflict area that could threaten stability in the Arctic in the long term. Purchasing Greenland would also raise an important political question. Is it still legitimate to sell vast territories between nations in the 21st century? But Trump seems determined to follow through on his plan this time, backing it up by saying he would even use the military if necessary. This, of course, immediately set off alarm bells in European capitals. But how realistic is that, really? First of all, one can say that no option can be completely ruled out with Trump. Nevertheless, this scenario seems rather unlikely, and seems more like part of his political staging, because it would undermine the entire legitimacy and security infrastructure of the West, which insists on unchanged borders. In addition, NATO would be divided like never before. The economic approach, however, is much more likely, and not at all far-fetched. There are only 56,000 inhabitants in Greenland, to whom Trump could, in an emergency, simply offer enough money until they would vote for independence and subsequent annexation to the USA. The Self-Government Act of 2009 granted the Greenlanders the right to independence. Specifically, it states that the Greenlanders can hold a referendum on independence at any time. If the majority of the population votes for it, Denmark is obliged to respect this wish and negotiate the modalities for secession from Greenland. Trump could subsidize the country so much and shower it with money that the Greenlanders would have no choice but to agree. With just $10 billion, each Greenlander would receive $200,000. For the USA, which spends over $850 billion annually on its military alone, that would be peanuts. What do you think? Will Greenland really become part of the United States in the future? Feel free to write in the comments. Well, folks, and with that, we end our video today. Write us your thoughts on this in the comments, and let us know about which topics we should make a video about. Otherwise, subscribe to our channel and see you next time here at Wikipedia Plus. Thank you all for watching to the end. I hope you enjoyed our content. A big hug, and until then, bye!